USA, USSR, fight!
Coming as a shock to absolutely nobody, the two global superpowers of the Cold War weren't exactly erstwhile allies during World War II. Throughout the conflict, the United States and the Soviet Union remained suspicious of each other, and these suspicions eventually boiled over. Before the Cold War even started, the USA and USSR had already faced each other in battle. This is their tenuous story. While remaining nominally allied for the duration of the Second World War, the USA and USSR were extremely distrustful of each other. The Soviet pledge to spread communism around the globe didn't sit well with the champions of capitalist enterprise. Nor did empire building in the Asia-Pacific endear the Americans to the Soviets. In the last 2 years of the Second World War, tensions between the great powers were mounting. Stalin never forgot that his desperate requests for the Allies to open a second front against the Axis in Europe were ignored for 3 years. He felt strongly that the Americans and British had waited for Germany to cripple the USSR before showing their hand, only invading when the Germans were already beaten in the east and on the run. While famous for his paranoia, Comrade Stalin's suspicions may not have been too far from the truth. On top of that, the US ambassador in Moscow, William Harrison Stanley, had spent a good part of his tenure investigating Soviet war crimes in Poland, undoubtedly straining diplomatic relations. In Britain, Winston Churchill openly declared in a speech to Parliament that socialism is, in its essence, an attack on the right of the ordinary man or woman to breathe freely without having a harsh, clumsy, tyrannical hand clapped across their mouths and nostrils. Stalin saw the investigations and Churchill's speeches as evidence that the West was plotting against him. Believing the old dogma, the best defense is a good offense, Stalin seized all previously German territory taken over by the Red Army in their push westwards, establishing friendly puppet governments to consolidate his control. This scared the Western powers even more than the now floundering Third Reich, and they sought to act on it. Both the Western Allies and the Soviets spied on each other throughout the Second World War, but unfortunately for the Brits and Americans, the Soviets were just better at it. Soviet agents had effectively infiltrated both British MI6 and the American State Department before the war had even started. In fact, it was stolen designs for an experimental American tank that formed the basis for the formidable Soviet T-34. Aside from experimental weapons, Stalin wanted his agents to collect intel on the Western Allies' communication with Nazi Germany. He worried that Roosevelt and Churchill would make peace with Hitler early, abandoning the Soviet Union. On the other hand, the Americans were worried sick about the spread of communism around the world. But instead of infiltrating the KGB, which really wasn't easy, they kept tabs on diplomatic traffic coming from Moscow. The back and forth chatter was like an 11-year-old on Xbox Live. A lot of big talk, but nothing usually came of it. Fairly new to the spying game, the Americans weren't fully aware of this and managed to scare themselves into believing Stalin had plans to set up a Soviet satellite state in Mexico, as well as just about everywhere else. What did all this espionage actually manage to accomplish? Well, both were increasingly paranoid about the other seeking world domination. What was needed was some joint exercises to smooth things over, to convince both sides they could work together against a common foe and that they weren't so different after all. It worked about as well as you might expect. The operation was codenamed Frantic, and on principle, it wasn't a bad idea. American heavy bombers would take off from Italy, bomb targets on the Eastern Front, then land to rearm and refuel at Soviet air bases. This technique, known as shuttle bombing, massively increased the effective range of the American bombers, as well as providing an opportunity for increased American-Soviet cooperation. Operation Frantic ran from June to September 1944, but problems arose almost immediately. The first was a devastating German counterattack. On June 21st, 145 B-17s and various other bombers attacked an oil plant in Ruhland, Brandenburg. Their mission complete, 73 B-17s landed at Poltava in the USSR, but unbeknownst to the Americans, they had been followed. A lone Luftwaffe HE-111 stalked the bombers from a distance and discovered their secret Soviet base. The next night, a force of 75 HE-111s and Ju-88s descended on the airbase at Poltava. Spotters had warned the ground crews in advance, and the Soviet air defenses were ready. There was just one problem. They were totally useless. In his infinite wisdom, Stalin only supplied a few truck-mounted 50 cal machine guns to defend the American planes he was supposed to be looking after. That was it. The base had no spotlights, no radar-guided anti-aircraft guns, and no specialized night fighters, all of which were common at bomber bases in the West. With nothing to aim at except for the rumbling of German engines, the Soviet gunners were completely ineffective. Paradoxically, their positions around the airbase likely marked a convenient perimeter for the German bombers. It was utter carnage. By the morning, 47 B-17s were burnt wrecks, and of the rest, only 7 could still fly. Additionally, virtually all the B-17's fuel, ammo, and spare parts were destroyed. This incident cemented the rift between the American crews and their Soviet hosts. But as the weeks passed, things only got worse. The Soviets liked to stick rigidly to schedules, and when a plane appeared in the sky unexpectedly, they tried to shoot it down. On the other hand, American pilots would sometimes wing it and change plans to seize opportunities as they arose. The result of these incompatible systems was that American planes coming in outside predetermined flight corridors and times would often be shot at. In the words of Colonel Moller, "We did get shot at with a machine gun at Kharkov till the Russians realized we were friendly." Fortunately, it wasn't very good shooting. With friendly fire incidents stacking up alongside reports of equipment theft and orchestrated violence, American goodwill ran out and Operation Frantic was brought to a close. Instead of promoting cooperation between the US and USSR, the operation cracked their tenuous alliance even further. But it was about to get a whole lot worse, escalating to a full-scale battle. On November 7th, 1944, a group of P-38 Lightnings commanded by Colonel Curly Edwinson were flying low through a valley near Nis in modern-day Serbia. Their aircraft were fast, cruising at 200 knots, and around them lay nothing but mountains, the summits of which they were flying under. Curly's mission was to strafe a German troop convoy retreating from Greece to the Danube Valley. Making their way through the valley on the ground was the Soviet 6th Guards Rifle Corps. The men were loaded up in trucks, and leading the convoy was a staff car containing their commander, General Kotov, and several other officers. They were chasing the same German unit which was traveling parallel in another valley. Curly, seeing a convoy of trucks ahead of him, maneuvered his planes into position and attacked. He and his P-38 made several strafing runs before zipping away over the mountains. But Curly had made a terrible mistake. He had navigated his planes into the wrong valley and then launched an attack without first positively identifying his enemy. High caliber bullets tore into the Soviet convoy's lead vehicles. General Kotov's car was demolished, killing its occupants along with several other trucks. In desperation, Soviet radiomen contacted the nearest airbase and 2 squadrons of Yak-3 fighters were scrambled. The Yak-3s raced to the convoy and pounced on the low-flying P-38s, forcing them onto the defensive. The Soviet flight leader, Captain Koldenov, was a celebrated fighter ace and more than a match for the large American planes. Dogfighting high above the city of Nis, Koldenov and his men managed to shoot down 2 P-38s before Curly turned tail. But the damage had been done. Around 30 Soviets were dead, including General Kotov. The air battle over Nis was the only battle between US and Soviet forces during the Second World War. But one question remains. Was it intentional? There's no doubt that the Americans were in completely the wrong place by accident, but the convoy they targeted was covered in Soviet markings. Curley's liaison officer, Colonel Lowenberg, reported, "I think that Curley said that the cars had German markings." Not so. When Curley led the strafing of the column, several squadron commanders screamed over the radio, "They're Russians." That didn't stop him. On the other side, the striking resemblance between P-38s and Focke-Wulf 189s initially led the Soviets to believe they were under German attack, but Koldenov and his airmen quickly realized their foes were American. This didn't stop them either. A US investigator commented, "Considering the previous attack on the motorized column, the Soviet fighters probably attacked in kind, seeking revenge." Was it intentional? Well, we'll leave it up to you to decide. That was the story of the tenuous relationship between the Soviet Union and the United States during the Second World War. But what do you think? Why do you think Operation Frantic was such a failure? What do you think happened in the skies above Nis that fateful day? Was the alliance doomed from the start? Let us know all that and more in the comment section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned something new.